The Core 360 belt is the best aid to train the abdominal wall. The Core 360 is a patent-pending, first-of-its-kind training belt that helps you move, breathe, and perform better. We use the Core 360 belt with almost every patient at Winchester Spine and Sport. The biofeedback is second to none, and it's an amazing way to teach proper respiration and can be even used during higher-level movements in the gym. Teaching proper respiration is about as fun as a rash, but with the Core 360 belt, you take all the headaches away. Visit core360belt.com and use the code GESTALT for 10% off all belts, Ohmtrack sensors not included. Again, visit core360, core360belt.com and use the code GESTALT for 10% off. Enjoy the episode. All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Gestalt Education Show. We are in Brett's Mecca, I guess. I mean, basically, he kept telling me that there's a statue. We've been driving all over hell here in Columbia, Brett. There's not a damn statue of you.
We just haven't found it yet.
It's buried somewhere deep or what?
It's at Harpo's.
Okay.
It's in the river.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we are here in Columbia, Missouri. It's been a long time coming for us to come up the road and sit down with the best in Columbia, no doubt, Dr. Curt Kippenberger. And so, Curt, I first actually met you at the first FTCA conference. So we were both speaking at the TED Talks in the beginning, and so that was kind of the first time that I really got to know you. And you have a reputation for not only having a huge practice here, but for managing it really well. So we could talk for hours with you about clinical stuff. We could talk about patient management, stuff like that. But I thought today, Brett and I were really thinking today would be a great addition to our contemporary practice management. So not only are you a coach for the Modern Chiropractic Marketing Group of Kevin Christie, who's been on our podcast, you've also done a ton with Chiropractic Success Academy. And then you also are the biggest sucker in Missouri, right? Because you're the District 3 president of the Missouri Chiropractic Association, which is a joke, but it's actually a huge deal. And we're thankful for you for taking that on, because there needs to be more people like you in management. So, Curt, what brought you to Columbia first? Let's put it that way.
Oh, man. I don't know if I have anything to say after a welcome wagon like that. But, thanks for having me on. And certainly happy you guys got to come to Columbia, to Brett and I's alma mater. Where'd you go to?
Nebraska.
Yeah, do they have secondary education in Nebraska?
Well, they're actually Division I, so Mizzou is
2.5
NAIA or something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Columbia, I grew up in Rolla, Missouri. Columbia was one of a couple of towns that my now wife, then girlfriend, and I were looking to go to. And quite honestly, she got into some schools that I wasn't smart enough to, and I came to Mizzou. We just really, I came up here for sports camps all the time. So wrestling and baseball and Show Me State Wrestling. So I became very familiar, and then later with mountain biking, and I was pretty stoked that I could get an education, also ride my bike.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So we'll talk us through owning your own practice. Did you always know that this was your stop? I mean, where did this all kind of start? I think that's a question that most people have, and most people want help with deciding that.
I guess if we rewind, chiropractic found me. I didn't find chiropractic, so I was an athletic trainer for the football team and planned on either pursuing a graduate degree in exercise physiology or physical therapy. But PT was going through that identity change of master's versus doctoral, and I was looking at the cost of education and the lack of autonomy that they were gaining because of that. It just didn't seem like a good fit. So Mizzou did not have a formal athletic training program at the time, and my buddy Thomas was going to St. Louis for a bike race. I was going to tag along, and he just happened to go tour this school called Logan for a profession I'd never heard of with chiropractic. And when I came in and heard some of the instructors talking about what you were able to do, I was like, man, I get to marry PT, athletic training, and gain this new skill with manipulation. And I signed the paperwork that day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was bizarre. Krista actually almost signed the paperwork that day, and she hates touching people and hugging people. And it's just like, there's no way. But, there was this minute of grandeur where we're going to go open this gigantic practice and have a dynasty. And so fast forward, went to school. Obviously, that's where I met Brett. I took my first MPI seminar when I was at Tri 2. Actually, my first seminar ever was my first weekend at school. 3 guesses what it was. First 2 don't count.
had to be adjusted on?
NUCA.
No way.
Yeah. I met a guy in the library when we were looking for places to live. Not that I was looking to live in the library, but at Logan, this guy named Phil, I met him and he told me about a seminar. I was like, that sounds cool. And it was free, so that was better. And man, talk about being in over your head on your first week at chiro school. Go to a NUCA seminar. But anyway, fast forward, I took a MPI spine course. Man, I can't remember all the instructors were there, but it was great because our entire class came. And we had a big group of just absolute, stud chiropractors come through. And we kept that all the way through. We kept going to seminars and yada, yada, yada. So we get to the point, where Tri9 pay dirt's starting to happen. And I felt competent enough with my hands because of all the extra stuff that we were doing outside of school. I mean, I think the circle that we run in, we certainly see that, if you're not picking up somebody's head and shaking like a freaking dog, then you probably are going to be okay. Right. Better than the majority coming out. Clinically, I felt pretty comfortable too because Craig Liebenson had his stuff, and you guys were just starting some of, what was it originally called? It was upper and lower quarter dynamic assessment.
Yep.
So I'd taken one of those courses before we exited school. And of course, just taking Brett's course and the rehab courses there at Logan at the time. We just had a lot of opportunity to feel fairly clinically sound. And I'm not going to discount like the physical examination, differential diagnosis. Like we got a really, really solid education on that, but I felt okay putting that together. What I didn't feel okay with is running a business. And we had been introduced to some folks while we were in school. I knew some pretty prominent business owners here in Columbia, and all of them had mentors, coaches, consultants, whatever you want to call them. And it made sense. Like sports teams have coaches for a reason. They make big decisions. They look at the practice holistically from a 30,000 foot view. And so we found some mentors and some coaching that worked very, very well for us in the beginning, and can't be thankful enough for what they taught us, from building systems to delegating to automating certain things. But it was a broader practice management style, and it didn't fit our model. And our model's hard to fit. Yeah. I mean, you guys live in it every day. It's hard to manage people with manipulation and soft tissue and Ty and McKenzie and functional assessment, and then have a gym and juggle all of those things. And there's just simply not there's not one way to do it correctly.
Nor is there like somebody who's really doing a good job besides you guys of like the quality piece versus quantity. Like practice management over the years has always been about, it's not rocket science. You see more people to make more money,
Right.
So if you're delivering a higher end service, how do you play in both those sandpits? I think it's difficult.
It's absolutely difficult. And, we were fortunate enough to figure out some early ways to scale. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It wasn't all, kitty cats and rainbows coming out of the gates. I mean, we got a business loan, and it was, much larger than we probably should have taken. I actually listened to a podcast the other day. It was like, take about half of what you think you really need. That way you can struggle, and then you don't owe the rest of the money back, right? Because you're still going to figure out a way to make it work. But yeah, we we're off and running. I was paying myself a salary out of the gates, which is mistake number one. Mistake number two was we outfitted every single room in our 1,200 square foot clinic with, not top of the line stuff, but every room had a table, every room had a chair, every room had a picture on the wall. I really needed one room, one chair, one table, and a bunch of closed doors, and a bunch of patients thinking all the other patients are in those closed doors.
Right.
And then, after pay dirt hits, you can then scale back up, right? So certainly made that mistake, and we were flat out broke. Krista and I ran out of money from our business line of credit. We actually got to a point where our cell phones were shut off. Our electric at home got shut off because we weren't paying the bills. Like, we just couldn't. And we had just hired our first employee. And I look at Krista, I'm like, we've got to pay Nicole. Like, we can't not just say, hey, like, welcome, but Pay's optional. And so I remember calling my dad and just talking through it. My dad was an accountant, and I remember when I told him that I was going to chiropractic school, he's like, "Oh man, that's awesome. You're going to help a lot of people. How much does that cost?" And I told him, he was like, "You're an idiot." And later, when he came in for our grand opening, he was like, "Oh man, you can tell you're in the right place." But I was telling him like, what our struggle was. He's like, "Curt, how much do you need?" And I was like, "Well, I got to pay Nicole." I was like, "I got enough in the bank to pay Nicole. I've got rent due." And I think if we can make that happen, we were just waiting to get in network with insurance. It's like double dutch. You're just sitting there jumping and jumping and jumping and waiting to get in. And he's like, "I'll tell you what, I'll cover your rent. I'll cover a few extra expenses. What else do you need?" And I was like, "Man, Dad, that's it. Like, done." And so got the check, paid Nicole, paid whatever else we needed to. Next month, practice doubled. Next month, practice doubled. Insurance came in. And it represented a few things, right? Like I'd hit my rock bottom of financial wherewithal, and just seeing that my dad was going to be as supportive as he was to back me. And, they didn't make a ton of money, so this was a big deal for them too. But it felt so good just a few months later to write that check back to him and say, "Man, thanks for picking up the boat and portaging with me." Because I don't know, I'm sure again we would have figured it out, but man alive, like it just woke me up. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, and I think, you kind of alluded to your coaching initially. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of taboo in the chiropractic world or in our world right now to say, "Oh, I have practice management, or I have coaching, or I'm paying someone to tell me what to do." And now that's kind of shifting because we have these other options with what you're involved in.
Yeah, I got to be honest, when we were approached in school, we were taught by many chiropractors to just avoid management groups, coaches, gurus like the plague, because they all eat their young. And when integrity began courting Krista and I felt that way. And I flat out told Shelly, the CEO, or CFO, excuse me, that I was just like, I can't do this. Like, it's just not smart from what I've been told. And she looked at me, she said, "Well, what would make you believe that we believe in you?" And I was like, "Show me a practice and a model that I want to practice in, and this is what I'm envisioning." I'm a student, I'm not smart at this point, but this is what I'm envisioning. Yeah. Chiro, soft tissue, and rehab. And so she took me to a practice actually not far from where we lived in St. Louis, Dr. Matt Lytle's practice. He used to be an ART instructor.
Yeah, sure.
Great dude. And he had a bustling practice. And I was like, man, there's no way that this guy's got a coach or a management group. And I sat down with him, and she's like, "What's the secret?" And he's like, "What's secret?" I was like, "There's got to be a catch." He's like, "No, there's no catch." He's like, "How many patients are you going to get? How much are you going to charge them? And then how many times are you going to see them? Simple equation." Yeah. Okay. That's it? Yeah, that's it. And so don't get me wrong. That's like the very layering of the practice metrics. But, what we were taught were how important systems are, and there should be a system for everything. And, those systems should also be malleable. They need to change with the times. And I think as our practice evolved and changed, that's what, changed for our mentoring and coaching needs. And so probably through a podcast or something like that, I was introduced to Kevin. Actually, no, it was Forward. It was Forward 18. Yeah, there's a lot of good things that happened out of that weekend.
Yeah, my goodness.
There's a lot of bad things too, but we won't talk about that today. It was interesting because Kevin was talking, but I remember being so uninterested in marketing at that standpoint because our practice had kind of hit that autopilot layer of being, 7-8 years in. Word of mouth was really our biggest source of referrals. Again, I'm still an idiot. Not that I'm a student anymore. I guess I'm always a student. Should have probably went to that lecture, but I've seen a few more since. Anyway, I got to meet Kevin. Got introduced to Bobby and the FTCA, and I was just kind of impressed with some of the stuff that he was doing. And I mean, CSA was just like a twinkling in both of their eyes at that point, and they kind of shared some of that. But I had a unique perspective that I had kind of been through this process before. And so we started talking and started working with Kevin a little bit later that year in 2018. So that must have been the fall. And I don't know, I think I started mentoring for the CSA right after they launched, and that was 2019. And it was just a really good way to reconnect with some populations I felt very passionate about. I mean, one, there's a little bit of a student population there. And, one of the things that I don't know if I stole this from you, if I just observed this from you, Brett, but I was like, how the hell does Brett get all the really, really great interns? It's like, well, he teaches every freaking weekend and he can literally filter out who the best of the best is. And then I was like, not only is he a genius, I need to go to those seminars too. And so I started retaking the seminars that I took in school and that I'd kind of taken along the way. And it reminded me how important it is, because that first seminar that I took with, I think it was Corey for extremities. I was just like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Or, man, that's changed. Something's new. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes that, young docs, new clinicians, students make is they look at seminars and coursework like it's a checkbox.
Oh, that's true.
I've done it. I've got it in my back pocket. And no, that's the gateway drug. That's the entry point. Like, you should be retaking that course every couple of years, if not annually.
Right.
And it was funny, one of the ways that I became an SFMA instructor is, to use Brett's language, I became a rash, essentially. And Michelle looked at me one day when we were in Denver. She's like, Curt, this is like the 10th time you've audited SFMA in the last, 7 years. Are you looking for a job? I was like, absolutely.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah.
What do I decide?
And if it would have taken 11 more, I would have done it again. And the same is true. I pick up something new every single time that I walk into one of those conferences or seminars.
Well, I think what it does too, I mean, one of the things that's not told to, students or young docs or chiros in general is being confident or certain about whatever you're delivering is a really important component of it. So like those seminars also get the young physician, excited again. And I think like the patients actually pick up on that, because you now have the certainty to, have confidence with whatever you're delivering, and I think that's an underrated reason like to go to seminars, because you actually, I mean, we've all been there. Like you go to a hot seminar and you go to your patients on, it's just different. Like you have the confidence now. And I think that is a great, people don't talk about it, but that in itself is a practice management tool, because it gets the chiro more certain about, what they're doing.
Exactly.
And I think too, like from a student's perspective, I remember seeing you at a couple seminars that I was a student at, like, oh damn, that's like cool. Like, it's cool to see guys coming back and retaking seminars and, giving their insight every once in a while, but then also like being plugged into the actual seminar. You're not just showing up and, doing your own thing in the corner. Like we talk about nothing's worse than you show up to a seminar and you get the guy in the corner teaching his own damn seminar, but right. To actually be involved with it. And so, and you're 100% right. I mean, that's how, you've had some amazing interns over the years, and that's why, because people want to be involved with the practice and want to be around people that are willing to go that extra step.
I can remember years ago, we were recruiting for a new doc, and we had a doc that didn't work out, and I was busy as hell because of that, absorbed basically everything that we had kind of built up over that past year. And so I had to seek out some help with recruiting and went through whatever company it was. It doesn't matter. And, they go through an interview process, and I wasn't getting resumes coming across my desk. I was like, I've done MPI, I've done DNS, I've done these seminars that I respect. And so I'm getting, and not to throw anybody on the bus, I'm just getting people that are mediocre because of that. I mean, if you just check the boxes to graduate college, you're just going to graduate college. You're not going to get that dream position. You're not going to get, in a really, really awesome office. And, we got burned by a few of those, and then you're paying a bunch of money for the recruiting. And so it was like an epiphany one day. I was like, why don't I go to the places where I would spend my money and my time? And again, it was probably, I was hanging out at a seminar and I'm just looking around the room, and I was like, well, Brett's got that guy locked down. He's Brett's last intern. He's going over with Mark. Light bulb.
Yeah. What do you think about, so now that you're on the other end of coaching, give us 3 things that you notice across the board on all of your new people that you take on. Like what is it that they're not doing well that you initially are going to try to work on with them?
Systems is always first and foremost, because I think a lot of people can run with the ball on their own to a certain degree until they meet that tight end, or not tight end, that cornerback on the sidelines, right? They're going to smash you every time. And so whether that's the glass ceiling of capacity, whether it's the fact that they're getting burnout because they're doing all the adjusting and all the rehab and all the soft tissue and all the admin, like the lone wolf practice is really hard. I know a lot of folks that have been in that model. And even if you have one admin person, at some point, there's just, your face is going to be against the glass and you have one or two options. You see more people or you charge more money, right? Like that's really the only way to do it. And I think in a very insurance-driven medical model, it is hard to take that leap into a cash-based practice. I mean, there's some sanctity to that, but there's also some risk with that. So systems is first and foremost. And I think clinically and I think administratively and marketing-wise, all three of those facets need to be covered.
Mark's got a great line. He says, if you have to do something more than once in an office, it needs a system, Yeah. So I think that's a good point. I was going to ask you, and you already said it. So we're talking systems across like what we're doing in the treatment room, what we're doing at the front office, the back office, the gym, like all of that would benefit from a system.
Absolutely. We call it our patient journey. So walk a mile in your patient's shoes. If you were walking into the most prestigious conservative healthcare clinic in the country, what would you expect? What smells would you expect to be in the office? What pieces of artwork on the wall? How do you want to be greeted, whether it's on the phone or in person? Like all of those become important. We haven't even mentioned anything about the doctor yet, right? Mm-hmm. So we always joke the doctor in our clinic is only about 25% of our patient journey or patient experience. So we're really like the guardrails that help kind of guide the bowling ball down. You can still throw it in the gutter every time. Or you can hit a strike.
Or the docs could be the one to mess it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 9 times out of 10, that's probably the case. Except in my docs model. They're fantastic.
They've never
me every time. And then from a marketing standpoint too, so circling back to, me kind of dismissing Kevin's lecture back at Forward 18, how do you piece your marketing together to have a really clear message? I mean, everything that you produce on Facebook should be able to be repurposed on YouTube, into a blog, into an email. And there's no sense in creating those 10 different pieces. Like Mark said, if you're going to do it once, make sure it's like hitting every single cogwheel all the way through. So I think that was the compelling part to really entertain. One, me paying for coaching with Kevin, and two, begin to working with him. I think, one of the other things that I see very commonly is in the CSA, we talk about the 4 freedoms. We've got freedom of time, freedom of purpose, freedom of money, and freedom of relationships. Generally, 3 of those things are missing in anybody that we talk about from a consulting realm. And then that drives a burning desire to either leave the profession, to downsize, to do something else, because you want out of it in a certain manner, right? So if you have all the time in the world, that means you probably are also suffering in money and likely relationship, right? You might feel purpose-driven at that point because you're fishing all day.
Right.
Same thing, if freedom of purpose, unless you're utilizing your skill set to teach like you guys do, to create an educational company, it's really hard to fill some of those other cups. To truly have an appreciation of those 4 cups, I think it takes somebody way outside of your practice to be able to help with that. And that's where a coach or a mentor helps. I've got lots of different favorite quotes, but one of my favorites is, you can't see the entire picture if you're stuck inside the frame. And, I think a lot of us get stuck inside the frame. We get edged up against the borders and we just really can't appreciate the entire portrait, because honestly, none of us want to fail. But if you have somebody help you fail, or at least help tell you when you're failing, I think that's a really, really powerful person to have in your back pocket.
My wife, she was broadcast journalism, but then she actually here at Mizzou, that's where we met, but she ended up more on the public relations side. And she's always quick to remind me that, you have public relations and you have advertising. Those are 2 different animals. And I think like in the past, chiropractic has focused really hard like on the advertising, which is free exam, free x-ray, that whole bit. But like the PR side, which is basically like building your brand, building your name. And I think that's more like for us and more of that evidence-based circle. We always talk about in our office, like we're trying to be like what Heinz is to ketchup. Like you don't even think of ketchup, you think of Heinz. And the reason is Heinz isn't like giving out a bunch of free ketchup. Instead, they've really done a really good job, like on their public relations campaign. You can also say Starbucks or, plug in whatever the name is. What do you think about like the difference between like public relations and advertising?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we all graduate with, and this is true of any new practitioner, is we're pretty low value and we're low expert, right? So even if you take a ton of MPI and DNS, you're definitely a few echelons. What you lack is repetition. And then generally, you also might have an entire Mac toolbox full of tools, but you just don't know to pull the right wrench when it's needed. So once you start to gain appreciation for that, which I think you can through with good PR, you start applying some of these principles of MPI DNS, the evidence-informed world of practice and treatment. And I think your patients become your PR team initially, right? They start rippling like, hey, this guy did this weird, like, had me on my back and he had me breathing with my belly. And like there was a straw involved. I don't remember what the straw was for, but there was a straw. And so, man, there's this 3R thing, and I can't remember the 4th R or the 3rd R, but it was like recruit. I think it's 5 R's actually. It doesn't matter. But anyway, I totally botched that up. Basically, if you do a good enough job treating your patients from an ethical and responsible way, they become your PR team initially. They start telling people about you. You get introduced to other people, whether that's other providers in your area, to become now a relationship networking or relationship marketing. And then honestly, I think when you start co-managing a bunch of cases, that's where advertising really starts to come in. As far as what is Brett Winchester better than anybody in the world at? Well, he can get you down on your back, teach you how to breathe with your belly, and then you can hit a home run immediately after. And, that type of advertising takes time too, right? Like you can't just come in if you're low expert and low value to become an expert, high value person overnight. It takes lots of reps, takes years, unfortunately, sometimes to get there unless you just really happen to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I've heard it said like early on, you need 100 raging fans. And I think that's what you're saying, and just giving like mediocre care, you're probably not going to deliver a raging fan. Yeah. But we all have those people in our practice. They literally will shout your name from a mountaintop. My joke is always, the patients who swear they're going to refer everyone to you don't. And then the person you didn't help sends you everybody. It's just like the weirdest oxymoron kind of in a way.
We hired a marketing woman many years ago. This was right as we were edging into becoming a 3-doctor practice at the time. And she had sent, of course, 4 of them were her direct family members. So she's got 3 boys and her husband came to see us. But on top of them, no joke, she sent us like 10 or 12 patients. And this is over the course of like a 6 to 8 month period. And so I looked at her, I was like, Lori, you want a job to, like, may as well get paid for what you're doing. And she was just coming away from kind of wanting to re-enter the workforce, stay-at-home mom. And she's like, yeah, it sounds amazing. I love coming here, everything. Next 3 months, 0 new patients. All we turned on was the dial of a payroll stub.
Yeah.
So she came to us and she's like, guys, I'm not doing this job very well. I think I need to withdraw. Guess what? 2 weeks later, first referral back from Lori.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was unbelievable. So huge fan, just not a fan under pressure, apparently, or something. I have no clue. But you're exactly right. Like, she would not have been my first person to say that she is going to be the person writing the reviews, shouting the rooftops. She was just always happy with her care.
Yeah.
So
I think the other thing, it's like Shawshank Redemption. I always say to students, like at these chiro schools, like you're led to believe, which that's probably a good thing, like that, you're in this bubble where everything's perfect. Everyone loves chiropractic. Everyone's going to like go to the chiropractor. And then you get out in the real world. What's not told to you is like you're like on the low end of the totem pole in the medical world, Sure. So it's a battle just to kind of like continue in your whatever town you're in to like, get everyone to not only refer to you, but like my initial goal was just like, I don't want you walking into your medical doctor. You don't have to refer to me, but I want them to at least say, I've heard good things about him, and they don't have to refer to me, but I definitely don't want them like MFing me behind my back, know. And then you end up treating all of them anyways. But like I think early on, like you're just led to believe that everybody loves, and then you get out in the real world, you're like, actually everybody hates chiropractic. Yeah. and then you got to kind of turn it in your town, like and then like once you've done it, then like I think then the pull actually switches, like. People then, they come to you for advice literally on anything. Correct. But that takes time. And that takes you doing that the right way for a while.
Yeah, we had a woman just last week that came in 3 or 4 weeks ago with a cervical radiculopathy. Did McKinsey, were able to centralize a little bit. She didn't follow up quite as quickly as I asked her to. However, she did come back in last week, and of course, I asked her if she had been doing her exercises. She said no. But now we're talking. We're 8 weeks into this, dilemma because it took her a few weeks to come in the first place. And so now we're really starting to think, okay, we've got a little motor weakness. We've got high grade sensitivity. Like, let's get an injection, put the fire out, and then we'll start rebuilding the building, right? The nice thing is over the years, because of those things, just like you guys, text your pain management specialist like, hey, I've got this patient, needs an injection, can you get her in? Absolutely, let's get her in Friday. I got a spot that just opened up. Things can happen really, really fast if you do good network marketing. But the cool thing is this woman, when I called, so we got some imaging in the middle of that. I called to render the results of the imaging over the phone to the patient. She's like, hey, can I have my husband call you? He understands medical lingo a lot better than I do. I was like, oh gosh, here we go. This is going to be intense. And so did the same thing, told him the same story that I told his wife. And he was like, man, you know what? I'm really appreciative of you. Thank you so much. She trusts you more so than anybody else. And that's why she stopped to you first, because she knows that you're going to be a straight shooter. And if you need to get her to somewhere else, you will. And if you think you can wrangle it in your office, you will. And I think that's what's missing in medicine. We don't have a true concierge. Chiropractors get to be that way because we are portal of entry. And if you're a good quarterback, you know when to pass the ball, throw the ball, or run the ball in, right? In this case, we had to at least pass the ball to get this chemical storm, and in her case, unfortunately, potentially some stenotic storm to go away. Can't do that with an injection. Fingers crossed that the rest of it comes off and we can help her out with the other before we send her surge.
What about, we kind of talked about those freedoms, so going back to them. So what about when you come across a practice owner, you come across a clinician that is in that burnout phase? Yeah. What are some of the quick hitters or things that if our listeners are kind of like, oh man, like I can't escape my practice. It feels like I'm sucked in. It feels like I'm working in my practice all the time. Grind. Like where do you start with that? Or what are some advice maybe that you've had?
Yeah, I know you guys know I had a rough year last year. Everybody had a rough last couple of years, but just a lot of loss in my family. And in November, I was there. I was like, I didn't really have my purpose because we weren't going out on the road. We weren't teaching. We weren't going to, conferences, seminars. My patients were great. My team is really what carried me, to be honest with you, through this. Like, if we didn't have the team in place that we had, there's a good chance that Focus on Health would have been up for sale towards the beginning of this year. So Kevin introduced me a book called Unique Ability. And I think when you get caught in that grind, one of the freedoms we lose quickest is freedom of purpose. Because, we all have our patients that love us and they're coming in because they love us and maybe for no other reason, I don't even know if you make me feel good, but I love you, so I'm going to keep coming. I just love being here, yeah. And, unfortunately, sometimes those cases are so clinically uninspiring, it gets boring. Yeah. But they're probably your best friends, so, it's just a catch-22. Anyway, Unique Ability kind of titers down what you're good at and what you love and how to marry those two things together. Because you can be really good at manipulation, but you might not love it. And if that's the case, that might not be your unique ability. Maybe you need to go teach it because you're really good at it, but maybe teaching fills your cup more than actually rendering that service. And I think, chiropractors, we're all pretty proud, right? Like, you don't get in this profession because, you're just looking for something to do on a Saturday. But I think some of us are scared to step away and really evaluate, is this something we love? I mean, I think, Brett, you do such a wonderful job showing that you love being in the trenches, treating people, and you also love teaching. And I've seen you in action in both, and it bleeds out of you. And that's a hard thing to manage because, I mean, you can't be two places at once. And when you're in Prague, you can't be in Troy, Missouri.
Right.
Which is also why you got studs like Taylor working for you, right? And all the rest of the crew. So I do think the freedom of purpose is one that is lost in that burnout phase. And again, the other cups are probably driving that because you're either really clinically uninspired, which I guess could drain that battery on itself, or you're struggling in the financial department. You're struggling not having enough time off because you're working, 60, 70 hours a week. Or, your spouse or your significant other is really pissed off at you because of one of those other reasons. So,
that's never happened to the three of us.
No. Filling that balance is really, and by the way, it's impossible for those four to all be in balance at the same time, right? Like something always has to give, something is going to have to be sacrificed. But one of the things, the third thing to wrap up that question from a little while ago, the third thing that I think I get a lot of questions about are finances. And so that is a big friction point. I mean, number one reason for failed marriage, money. Number one reason for failed business, money mismanagement. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an accountant, so I can't really give people really great advice on this, but we can give, direction towards it. But it's really funny, the people that suffer the most with money are those who have too much of it and they don't know what to do with it and they're paralyzed by fear to act, or they don't have any of it and they don't see a way out and over the hill with it. And it's not 50-50. There's probably more people with less, but I've got folks that have like a 6-month emergency fund for their practice and a 3-month emergency fund at home, and they're terrified to like update the paint.
Oh.
I'm like, man, if I ever would be in your situation, trust me, like I'd probably burn it all because that's what
I used to ride my bike with a guy who was 100% bought into Dave Ramsey. So he was, reading, and they took the Total Money Makeover course. So his wife gave him an envelope every day. And we'd be done riding. This is back in the day when I was drinking Gatorade, stuff like that. And I'd be like, let's go to the gas station.
Instead of Trulies.
Yeah, exactly. Trulies are like broccoli. But so basically he'd be like, I can't get a Gatorade because it's not in my budget. I'm like, bro, like I got your Gatorade. But like, I think like you can take it to a level where it's just annoying, Yeah, to your point.
Paralyzed,
you get paralyzed. Like, you got to enjoy your life. I mean.
Yeah, the live like no one else, so later you can live like no one else. Like, in the end of the day, he's not wrong. But man alive, the pathway to get there is really hard. If Krista were sitting in this room with us right now, she'd be glaring at me because, we're right before we came on, we were talking about a possible expansion, and every time we get to a point where we're, looking pretty good, it's like, okay, what's next?
How do I make my life miserable?
Yeah. But, it does feed back into the four freedoms, though. And I think if you can take anything away from our talk tonight, just respecting that there are balances that will come in and come out and exist. But then having somebody, whether it's a coach, whether it's a friend, a family member, just saying, hey, dude, are you getting enough time for yourself? Because you're kind of lacking in the other other 3 buckets, excuse me. I think that that's a really, really valuable aspect to have in your life.
Well, and I think, too, a lot of people are once you get to this point, you've been in school for basically your whole life.
Right.
You have these superficial things that you think make you happy, but you've never taken the time to actually think about the things that make you happy or the things that allow your brain to reset. I know you're a big outdoors guy. I got to imagine if you get overwhelmed, the first thing you're doing is getting the hell away from people.
Yeah.
Right. And so, that's just, I think, one of those things that people don't take enough time to actually figure out what those things are or feel like they can't because money or their family or things like that. And so I think, to your point of figuring out what those things are and then doing it, making time in your day.
I think, too, people think of their life like a pie chart. Like, you have work, you have play, you have working out, you have your time with your kids and your marriage. And he's heard me tell this before, but you know who Colin Cowherd is, the sports guy? He used to be on ESPN, now he's on Fox. But either you love or hate Colin Cowherd. And but he talks about this. He says, balance guy does not exist. And then he goes on to say, he goes, but if balance guy did exist, no woman in the world would want to sleep with balance guy. Like people think, oh, I want to be with a female or male who's balanced. But the reality of it is what you're really attracted to is, of course you want to like be a good dad, but you also want somebody who's not afraid to push some limits in some different spots. Right. And his point is like, you're not like every day of your life isn't a pie chart. Like what it really is, okay, today I'm doing a lot of work. Like tonight I'm missing my son's baseball game. Okay, so tomorrow I have to hit with my son. I got to like make up for it. You're not like, not everything's perfectly in balance. And I think it's like a mistake because everybody thinks like, oh, so-and-so's life is, no, it's not. Like things get off kilter for 2 days. Then you got to spend more time with your family. Work's got to like suffer for 2 days. And that's a little bit more of what like reality is, I think.
Yeah, it's almost like a revolving Venn diagram, right? So it's just like kind of spins on this little axis.
Yeah, that's right. A kaleidoscope.
Yeah, perfect. Oh,
yeah.
Dude.
There we go. That's another podcast.
Got to write that up on the whiteboard. Yeah. I was at a wedding right before stay at home and everything shut down. And the pastor talked about, everybody talks about it in a marriage doing 50-50. He's like, the problem is your 50 is always going to be more than Taylor's 50. And vice versa. You're always going to look at it from a comparison chart. He's like, just bring 100 every day. And if the 100 doesn't measure up, if you got to miss some stuff, then bring 100 the next day and the next day and the next day. And, I forgot how long he and his wife had been married, but it was a long time. I think 40 something years. He's like, that's been our secret to marriage is we both bring 100 a day. And my 100 might only be 70 that day, but the next day it's aiming at 100 again.
Or I think too, actually Mark's told me this too, like your kids, like you may be sacrificing some stuff, but your kids, they're not saying it, but they're looking up at their parents like, this dude is grinding and he's like, pushing some limits, and they're, without even noticing it, like you're instilling things that, you don't even realize you are just by showing them good work ethic and how to treat people. And, I think it's hard when you're in our world because like you're seeing patients all day long. You're off teaching and like, you still got to be a good dad. You still got to be a good husband. It's like, it's pressures from all over that people don't talk about.
Yeah. And Taylor hit the nail on the head. I'm an only child. I'm technically an introvert by nature. So and people really, they all laugh at that. Like, the hell you are. I saw you break dance at the last seminar. Which did happen at the Clinic Gym Conference 2 years ago. And that's this weekend.
I love it.
Coming back, baby. But when I recharge my batteries, I go rock climbing, mountain biking, generally by myself, sometimes with a few others. But you got to figure out a way to fill that bucket again and make sure that when you do come back on Monday morning that you're 100%, you're ready to give 100 to your patients and your wife and your kids and whomever else that needs your attention. So I got put in check hard, actually, when my oldest daughter, Cadence, was 3, I believe. Nicole, our first employee that I told you that we almost couldn't afford to pay, she was helping us out with the kids that night. And she was playing on the ground with Cadence some game, and she was like, you should play this with your daddy when he gets home. And Cadence is like, oh, when daddy gets home, he has to get on the computer and work. And so Nicole told me that when I walked in the door. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what a dagger to the heart feels like. And I literally changed my patient care schedule that next day because my parents were always there for me at baseball games, wrestling meets, and when they could be, of course. Like, it wasn't every time, but they tried to give their 100 every day.
Right.
And I was not giving my 100. And, after having a second kid, there's no way I could have kept going at the tilt that I was going at that point with face-to-face patient care and then still have enough in the
tank when you get home.
Yeah. Well, our conversation with Michael Gervais, I just listened to it again. He said life is about stacking moments. And, if you stack moments on top of each other, it doesn't become so overwhelming. Because if you just took a step back, and just all three of us, for example, you look at our schedules, you'd think, holy shit, like how in the hell are you guys doing this? And in reality, it's just you stack them. You take it moment by moment, you have an overall plan, but you just keep stacking on the moments. And then at the end of the day, you're like, wow, I got a lot accomplished. I was a good dad. I reached out to my friends. All these things just kind of add up, and I think that at the end of the day, then you're satisfied. Like then you can be happy with your day, and then once your days turn into weeks turn into months turn into years, et cetera, et cetera. So,
yeah. And Kevin, he's actually talked about it quite a bit lately, and I forget who the actual person who coined the term, but habit stacking, where you're maybe you're teaching DNS or you're teaching NPI or you're working out, but like all of those things are kind of like inching their way to the same goal. And that I think that's actually a really good point, because that's kind of how life is if you think about it. If you have, because I think of myself, like at one time I had rental properties and stuff like that, and like that investment was so over here with everything that I'm trying to do over here, that was actually taking so much time away from that. Finally, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I just sold everything. I was like, I would be better served to think of more creative ways to influence here than to like have myself so scattered, to where you're not doing anything really well because you're just everywhere,
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think there's dozens of ways to say it, but fuzzy targets don't get hit. So you sit there and run around with the chicken head off in the yard. It's like, I'm checking here, and you just stride on forward.
Yeah,
up the pyramid.
Well, we're kind of coming to the end. Curt, one thing that I did want to ask you is give us, like, I don't know, your last couple big hitters here as far as things that you think have made you successful in this practice, as far as, we've talked a lot about goal setting here. Are you a big goals guy? Like a couple of your daily habits that have really made you build this awesome practice and have allowed you to kind of push the limits of what's possible for a chiropractor.
Yeah, I think initially, when you're starting out, you don't have a lot of reference points. You're trying to build your value. So really, goals and numbers are really the only thing you can do initially to track any sort of metric. If you have one patient and you turn it into two, that's like I'm not real great with math, but that's pretty good.
That's pretty good, yeah. That's pretty good.
So, numbers were important initially. And I think probably 5 or 6 years in, we got so consumed by the numbers that we kind of forgot about our internal culture of our practice. Our patients were really satisfied. We were getting great results. We had a great clinical team. We had a good support team. But I really felt like I wasn't doing much as a leader. So I started seeking some mentorship outside of all of my chiropractic coaching to become a better leader. And I'm really, fortunate that person also had that, 30,000 foot view of myself. And it was hilarious when I scheduled my first session with Janine, who by trade is a psychologist, but really mostly works with businesses on this same level. I almost canceled it because I was busy. I was like, man, I got this meeting. I got this other stuff. And I was like, I think I've got everything else under lock and key anyway. I'm going to nix this. And my wife really encouraged me because she had really gotten some help recently for some mentorship on her own accord. And man, when I sat down at the coffee shop, I started talking, and it was all about me and not the practice. And I did not shut up for 3.5 hours. I don't know that she ever got a word in, which you guys can probably tell by the way I've talked to her.
That's why you liked her so much, right? Something about you I like.
So I got up, I was like, wow, I guess I needed this. And so, mental health, and especially, what we've been talking about from that freedom of purpose, like you do get bogged down with people in pain and people with problems and co-managing. And, I've heard on 2 or 3 podcasts recently with Brett, like you see that patient in the grocery store that you thought you helped, but really they're walking with a limp because they just had a hip replacement. And so yeah, all that'll get you out in the weeds and in the mud. So we really started trying to invest in our team, and kind of the same idea is like, well, I read all these books about professional development, self-help, and things like that. So we started bringing those to our team meetings and to our quarterly meetings and really focusing on some of those ideas within those books. And I mean, both of us probably have the same list, but, Simon Sinek was a big one. It's like, start with why. What is our why? And that's where we very clearly redefined our mission statement. We very clearly outlined our core values at that time. And in all honesty, now, every decision or every success or anything that we look at, if it serves my core values, if it serves my mission and my vision statements, then it's successful. Even if it's not financially successful, even if it's not time successful, if we're hitting those dots, I think the rest will come with it.
I think it's a really good point, because it kind of makes it easy to make decisions then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because then it's just as simple as yes and no. Yeah. This is not pushing me further towards my goal, and so I'm not going to do it. Yeah. Or this is going to. And I think, that's something we've talked about a lot with marketing, just myself, of like, you kind of said it earlier. Well, be where your patients are. Well, be where the people that you're trying to recruit are. And so if you just boil it down to that, then it becomes a lot easier, and it's not as overwhelming. At least it wasn't for me. Of like, okay, well, if I want to treat high school athletes, I should probably be where high school athletes are, or I should talk to their parents, or I should talk about those things. So
I think it goes back to Brett and yours, habit stacking, right? It's like, okay, high school athletes, and Kevin talks about where does your audience, where does your, we call them avatars or whatever you want to call them, where does your psychographic live? And, if that's CrossFit, you better find a local box. If it's running, it's hard to track down running. Kevin just said that in one of his most recent podcasts. It's hard to track down runners. Where do you find a runner? On the trails, at a running group, at the running store, coffee shop, wherever. You just have to go where they go. And of course, like, genuinely want to be there too, right? I think that's the other thing. It has to be a little organic. It can't just be like, I want to treat runners, and here I am. So I just bought my first pair of Ultras.
Yeah. Sweet, dude. Exactly. Maybe let's just close with what's your most recommended book? And then you can't say any of the normal podcasts. And what have you been listening to lately that you really like? You can't say our podcast, I should say. So.
I do. I've got a relatively small circuit of podcasts, to be honest with you. Podcasts are one of those that I try to really do on a consistent morning basis, and then usually when I travel, I try to knock out my audiobooks and all that. Let's see. You said book. I'm refinishing Traction. Again, it's a fantastic book, mostly about systems and then how to scale those systems. And then this is embarrassing with how big I am to rock climbing, but I'm finally finishing Alex Honnold's Alone on the Wall. I think my wife got that for me 4 years ago for Christmas or something. But I got to be honest with you, I don't read for quote unquote pleasure often. And so this has been a real treat, and it's kind of opening up the door. I'm going to read Tommy Caldwell's book after this called Pushing the Limits.
Two studs. What's the movie?
Free Solo?
No.
Or Dawn Wall.
Dawn Wall. Yeah, good. I mean, Free Solo was insane, but Dawn Wall was amazing. So
I'm real quick sidebar. I feel like such a jackweed for doing this, but whatever year Maru came out, Jimmy Chen, who shot both of these other films, he was here boots on the ground for True False Festival, which is one of the largest film festivals in the United States. And I had heard of him, and it was a beautiful day in February, and I decided to go rock climbing instead of go hang out with Jimmy. All my other friends were downtown meeting this world icon, and I'm out climbing at the Missouri River.
That's classic.
Yeah.
I had a great day.
Yeah, hey, that's all that matters. You filled your cup, right?
I did. Yeah, my freedom of time cup but my freedom of purpose in relationships definitely suffered that day.
Well, we ran out of time, but the other thing is you've kind of, dipped your foot in the water of chiropractic politics here in Missouri. Mm-hmm. So that's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, so with all you got going on, why in the hell did you take that on?
Yeah. You can't complain about something that you don't put effort towards. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself, thinking, man, I wish we had better speakers at our annual symposium. I wish we had, more congruency at our district meetings. And we have, not just under my influence, the predecessors did as well. But I just saw kind of a wax and a wane. And, it'd be really, really great to we have, I forgot how many, 2,000 licensed chiropractors in the state of Missouri. And we've got about 200 members. And of those 200, I would say, I don't know how many are active. Not many, So it'd be really great to see just more activity. I think everybody's like, what did the state association do for us or not? And it's like, well, they do a lot of things behind the scenes, and that's not here or there. What do you want your state association? What do you want your national association to do for you? And if you don't speak up about it, then nobody can help you. So I think it is important to support your state association and the ACA, and there's a lot more that we can do together than we can apart.
Yeah.
And so I do think that podcast, since the Movement podcast is back up online this year, that's the most recent podcast.
Nice. Yeah. Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you for all you do, not only mentoring other chiropractors, but for the state association and for being just an awesome friend too. So we just appreciate all you've done, and man, what a beautiful practice. I mean, you guys have done a great job. Talk about a good experience. I mean, bro, I was talking about walking through here. So that's amazing. If people want to contact you or hear more from you or ask any questions, you got any good outlets for them?
Absolutely. I respond really favorably to email at drcurt@focusonhealthchiro.com. And you can check out our website and our gym's website at focusonhealthchiro.com or movementlabcomo.com.
Beautiful. Columbia,
awesome.
Missouri.
Great.
Let's tear up the town.
Great job.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Have a great day, guys. Make sure you're filling up all 4 of your cups, not just 1 or 2. All right. Systems. Have a great day, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Gestalt Education Show. If you liked it, share it, subscribe to it, send it to your friends, send it to someone that needs to hear this message. We really want everyone to be able to tune in and get the best clinical advice that they can, which we're hoping that we're giving to you with these special guests. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, or if you have any suggestions on upcoming conversations, let us know. For a list of our upcoming courses, we're adding them all the dang time. So go to gestaltedu.com, click on courses, and they'll all be right there for you. All right, have a good day.